Oh my gosh, that was fast. Welcome, everyone. Welcome. I'd like to call the meeting to order. This is the regular meeting of the Board of Uplift Education. It's Tuesday, February 27th, 2018, and it is 4:33 p.m. So again, thank you all for being here. Thank you all in the seats behind this little group. We include you in our hearts and our minds and appreciate everything you do. So thank you very much. I would like to start the meeting on a more somber note than normal. Obviously, we're all very aware of the tragedy in Florida. And I'd like to compliment greatly the executive staff. Yasmin, thank you very much. Johnny, I know that you're very involved. The counselors all across the network, the directors, the MDs. I just have to say the faculty did an incredibly good job of working with our scholars. It was a very frightening event and obviously one that is impactful for us. I do want to let you know that Yasmin and her team are looking at a total threat assessment. Every level, they're talking to other campuses, other school districts, et cetera, about things that we might want to implement as well to make our scholars and our faculty and staff safe. We'll be presenting some information to you all in May on that, so just a heads up. The second tragedy, of course, was the death of one of our 6th grade scholars at Williams, Linda Rogers, and I think it's appropriate for us to just have a moment of silence, if we could. And I'd like to thank again the staff who came forward. I know that some of the CMO members went over to Williams to help there, as well as the social counselors. Stu, I know you're very involved, and I'd like to thank you, and I'd reach out to you. Would you have any comments that you might want to share?
See if I can do this without bawling. So, Linda Rogers, Mika Lead, was a 6th grade scholar at Williams. Her family's been involved in Williams for actually for several years. You always knew Mika Lead because she was just really cute little thing with a ginormous bow on her head from cheerleading. And the outreach and support from Uplift, Yasmin, and the whole team, counseling team. Remy, thank you. Whoa, here we go. The GoFundMe account that was set up is now being coordinated jointly between the church and the school. In 2 days, it's up to $22,000. If you haven't already given, go back and give some more, because they're not only raising costs for the funeral costs, but the hospital, but also because that house was completely destroyed. I don't know if you saw the picture on the news, but the house was lifted off the foundation by about 2.5 feet. I would like to see more response from the city. And Yasmin and I talked about, where's the Red Cross versus, it's early days, we're still working on things, so I just want to say thank you. The family is being supported, and I will add more in my update about the Williams CAC just in terms of those kinds of things. So.
And I just want to give an extra shout out to our campus staff who have literally been phenomenal with the Rogers family and have gone above and beyond. We have had staff members there every single day checking in on them. And also we are dealing with right now at least 20 families who are evacuees from the same exact neighborhood. And apparently there might be a second evacuation underway. And so Deborah and Eric, who leads our advocacy work, we're actually on the phone with the city of Dallas and with our local councilman, really advocating and pushing very hard that we need to have a meeting hosted at Uplift Williams to provide more accurate information to our families who are also wrestling with that. And then Lane in the back and Molly Solomon, who's the ops director, We've been coordinating what services we can provide to the other families who are being evacuated right now. Do they need personal toiletries? Do they need a safe space to go and do homework at night? Our CNP staff is coordinating if dinner needs to be served out of the campus. And so we're right now honestly just in assessment mode of how many are impacted and what are the highest need things that we can be providing right now. So we're making sure we're targeting our support.
That's great. Good. Are there any questions about our response? Again, I think we should all be very, very proud of Uplift Education that we are all a member of, and just thank you very much. Can't thank all of you enough.
So, do a great job.
That's great. So we'll return to the agenda if we could, and consider the minutes that were previously of the previous meeting on January 30. These were emailed to you. Do I hear any comments, changes? If not, do I hear a motion to approve? Do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Carries. Thank you. The second is a special meeting of the board that was held on February 23rd. Those minutes were not distributed ahead of time because it just happened. If you could, please glance over them at your table. I'd like to thank Ryan Moss for stepping in, leading that meeting. I was out of town. I appreciate that greatly. Our vice chair. Do I hear any corrections, comments? If not, do I hear a motion to approve? Second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Carries. Thank you very much. Okay. Regular reports. Here we go. Rich. Good.
Good afternoon. Today was an awesome afternoon for Yasmin and I, and for Sophia and Maya. We had our authorization visit for IB, our primary years program at Uplift Mighty, and our first in Fort Worth. And so that was a really exciting milestone for our Fort Worth community.
And lots of positive comments from the evaluators.
Absolutely. Yeah, great. I'm going to be jumping around the summary here for Around Academics. It's a short one. I'm going to break it up into two parts. The first part talking about high school, and then the second part talking about our predictions for 3rd through 8th grade STAR. So per TEA guidelines, we have to share with you our pass rates of end-of-course retesting. As all of you know, our high school students have to pass 5 end-of-course exams to graduate with a state degree in English 1, English 2, Algebra, Biology, and U.S. History. When we take the test usually in the spring, there are some students who do not pass, and we do need to share our retest rates from the summer as well as from December. The next chance for our scholars to take it, whether they are new testers or having to take the test again because they haven't passed, will be this spring. And then an RTC update. So I'm going to start with that first, kind of hop around. So here is the graphic that we have for our test rates for our high school end-of-course exams for the state. Now, if you look at the first column, that is spring 2017, so last spring. Our pass rates tend to be above the state averages across all of our tested subjects. However, if you look, our pass rates in English 1 and 2 are right around 69 and 73%. So really, you're looking at just over 2/3 who pass the assessment for the first time. So there's a good percentage of 9th and 10th graders, or in this case, rising 10th and 11th graders, who have to pass that test. And when you look at our cohort sizes, we have around 1,500 9th graders. So the students who need to pass the test because they failed the first administration, you're looking at almost 400 students. So if you look, the next column is the summer. We chip away at just around 25% of our retesters. That group goes from 400 to 300. And then in the fall, it says fall 2017, this is the retest date in December, we chip into it by another 25%. here's kind of the challenge that we have and why this is important for us to look at each year. Even though our pass rates on aggregate are in the 80, let's say in English 1, 85%, 15% of 1,500 students is a meaningful number, and these are students who have not passed after 3 administrations. So we've been, Remy and Karen, our high school MDs, have been really focused on what does intervention need to look like for those scholars who have struggled with this test with multiple at-bats. If you also then think about, we're going to add a new group of freshmen taking this assessment, you actually get into kind of an exponential problem, right? Because if our pass rates are, let's say, 70 to 80%, we're going to have 20% of students who didn't pass the test. This 15% kind of carry over. And from year to year, we just need to think deeply about what are the interventions that need to take place, because after a 3 to 5 year period, this number could be a large number of kids who haven't passed the test. And so this is definitely on our radar. And again, while our pass rates are above the state averages, we want to make sure that everyone successfully completes our high school program and meets the requirements of the state. And we're working hard on the interventions, particularly in English 1 and 2, where we have 13 to 15% of our students still struggling with that assessment. If you look at biology, US history, you're looking at just a few kids in the 90s. Most of our algebra test takers are in middle school in the 8th grade. So we're looking at really the 7% of the kids who haven't passed algebra are largely students with academic challenges who need to take these tests, as well as new 9th graders who have started in our program who didn't take our math sequence in middle school. So again, you're looking at a smaller group there. So I'll pause right here to see if anybody has any questions about our end of course retesting data.
Is there a percentage that never pass?
Yes. And that is usually when we have conversations with the special education team or talk about kind of the modified degree program for those students. Again, that's a very small group of students. There's certain data points and meetings that have to happen for a student to be considered part of that group. Great. Just kind of acceptances to date. We've had a number of schools accept our students, and it's very exciting to, this is really the time of year where our seniors are getting their acceptance letters, and there's just a lot of excitement and buzz around it, particularly at Uplift, Mighty, and Infinity. They're our first graduating classes from those schools, so it's really exciting. Just to the right here, in terms of acceptances to date, we already have over half of our scholars accepted to their safety school, 44% accepted to their match school based on their GPA and ACT. And then, again, these are mostly the early decision type students who applied to a REACH or selective school. We've heard back from a quarter of these schools already. And again, the bulk of the acceptance letters come in the months of March and April. We wanted to share a quick update. Last year we had, I think, around 12 college partners that had agreements with us and were considered an affiliate or a partner. And we've 2X'd that group. And I want to give a quick shout out to Mr. Stafford, if you don't want to, Chris, if you could raise your hand. He's one of our managers of College Partnership. And he and his colleague Yanadira, who's an Uplift Summit alum, who's the other manager of college partnerships, they've been working really hard to connect with new colleges and universities. We had a number of students that applied to Texas Wesleyan this year, or University of Rochester, Louisiana Tech. We're trying to find more schools, particularly selective schools, as these seats, just the number for these seats kind of grow. Traditionally, we've had our top third go to selective institutions. We're going from a 500 student graduating class to around 750, so really proportionally those seats are going to grow, and we do need to take our partnership work very seriously to meet the needs of our growing senior classes. And Chris and his team have been working really hard on building relationships with the the universities, but also getting the colleges and universities to connect with Uplift students so that we can get to the place where we're sending small groups of students to various colleges and universities across the country. Pause right there to see if anybody has questions for Chris, Daniel, or me around our college work and kind of update. Again, as we have more board meetings throughout the spring, we'll be kind of sharing updates as we go. Cool. I'm going to go back to our star prediction model. So we'll segue into grades 3 through 8. Just for context, being the data-friendly organization we are, we've used our MAP data, our Nationally Norm Reference Test, and our common assessments. We've been giving these assessments for multiple years now. So now we're at the point where we are making refined but conservative models to predict our STAR scores. As you know, that's something that we need to look at, especially around school accountability. We want to make sure every school is performing at a high level. I shared at the last board meeting that we took MAP, which informs a good percentage of the prediction model. We took that normed assessment early by 2 months, so that is kind of a deflating variable that we have. So you might see a dip in the predictive performance, but again, we want to be conservative so that we're responding to the data well. This last week and this week, our students are taking our third and kind of final rounds of interim assessments. So we're seeing some really positive data, particularly in our primary schools, where we've seen some really strong increases in math, third and fifth grade. A couple schools that made some really strong reading gains, so we're really excited about that. And you know, once this week's testing is complete, we will refine these dashboards so our school leaders have the dashboards that they need to reteach, intervene on the students getting ready for their state assessments in the early part of May. So we do have some runway. It's 4 weeks longer than typical. They moved the state assessment window back to May. Not a big fan about that decision from our testing coordinators, given how much AP and IB testing that happens in May on top of STAR, but we'll do what we need to do to make sure we execute these assessments. Again, a high-level data point. Math looked incredibly positive based on this mid-year halftime data. We're monitoring grades 3 through 5 pretty aggressively, partly because last year, as you recall, we were below the state average on reading and math assessments. And we did have some preliminary data based on this data from November, December in our prediction model with schools with a couple of subject and grade levels that were at risk of being below a 60% pass rate, which is kind of the line for index 1 on state accountability. For these schools, we've had some really strong interventions happening from our leadership coach, Karen Salerno, members of our instructional coach team, members of the curriculum team, really providing wraparound curriculum instructional support, and even doing co-teaching lessons or demo teaching lessons for teachers who are teaching some of these more challenging grade levels where the data is coming in a little bit low. So again, looking at our very conservative performance model, this is how the landscape shapes out. The red line is where the state averages are. So again, in 3, 4, and 5, based on the data in November and December, we're under that, but above the, we want to be at 75 or higher as an aggregate group, so and exceed those state averages. So I think we will have the data to push in that direction, and our CA3, especially in 5th grade and 3rd grade, looked incredibly positive. 6th, 7th, and 8th, you're looking at, this is math here, 6th, 7th grade looks to be at or above state average. Just for context, the 7th and 8th grade data is a little bit lower, particularly because we have students who are in algebra in the 7th grade. I would say about 25% of our 7th graders are taking the algebra assessment. Those 7th graders predicted to take algebra are looking to pass at 97%. So, so on aggregate, our 7th grade math pass rates assume the 80%, 75% at the 68, and 25% of the students at the 97%. And then in 8th grade, we have 62% of our students in algebra, 27% in 8th grade math, and 11% in geometry. Hence, the 8th grade data looks low, but that's really because that class is for our bottom quarter of our students, while most of the students in the 8th grade are in algebra or geometry. But the geometry students have to take 8th grade math, so and that's not figured into this model. These are just the kids in 8th grade math. Looking at the predictive models for reading, again, we do need to make this big push in 3, 4, 5 to push our pass rates into that 75 and above range. That was the kind of internal goal that we set with our primary directors. And then in middle school, you're looking at or above the state average predictions for pass rates in middle school. One of the things that we do need to monitor, the prediction model doesn't do a great job of assessing this, particularly because the margin of error is pretty wide. When you run if you look at the column on the right, the advanced students, it's just very hard to model for that, but that's kind of what we anticipate. But usually we do have stronger rates of advanced rates. I think we're being pretty conservative on this model. The schools that were kind of hotspots, Hampton Primary, this was, we looked at the 3rd and 4th grade math data from CA3 and it looked much stronger. So we're less concerned about Hampton. This is, again, data from November, December. And their recent data on CA3 looked pretty positive, so we're not too worried about Hampton. Meridian and Mighty, there are a couple of grade levels and content areas that we need to monitor. And then Pinnacle Middle School, the 6th grade performance looks pretty healthy. We have a number of kids coming from the Pinnacle primary. In the 7th grade, we do have a mix of both Pinnacle primary students as well as students that we've taken in. And just for context, there were, I think, a couple of DISD school contractions and closures. There was a charter school network that served special needs students, Focus Academy, that closed down last spring, summer. And so we did get an influx of students who, quite honestly, we're still rebuilding their kind of academic bones and doing a ton of intervention there. And so, you know, we are worried about the 7th grade at Pinnacle Middle School, but we have a team on it that's doing guest teaching and supporting teachers with data and assessments, instructional plans. But we do realize that when we added more students into the mix, the students just came with much higher need that we just needed to adapt and be ready for. And so we'll be continuing to monitor that. But you know, the team is in awesome spirits, just doing the best they can, and we're doing a good job there.
And just as an aside, just given what we saw with the influx of particularly the new 7th graders at Pinnacle Middle School, we decided for next year's 6th grade class to only bring over the children from Pinnacle Primary and then a small handful, less than 10 new children into the 6th grade cohort until our primary kids are all homegrown from now the new campus we're opening up on site on Camp Wisdom and from Pinnacle Primary.
Any questions on the 3rd through 8th grade data?
Good job, thank you very much. And terrific information about the partnership schools, so thank you very much. Okay, finance, Jack and Stacy.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'll walk through our finance update. You've got this in part of your pre-read. I'll just start with the dashboard here and a few things we'll call out and give you some context on. In the upper right, our enrollment is, our projection is down just a little bit from where we were in January. Pretty similar, but we're about 100. Our current enrollment is down about 150 versus where we were in January. Attendance is kind of the big change that you notice as you read through the pre-read. So year to date, This looks very different than what we presented at the last meeting. So year to date being 96.1 versus 96.6. The attendance rate in the first part of the year has been incredibly low, just compared to where we have been historically. There wasn't enough really for us to catch this in the data that we ran for you in January. But as we have another month or so under our belt since then, we've just realized this number is real low. You'll notice, however, we have not changed our full year projection because as we had the big drop from January to February. We had at our senior team this week, executive team and a level or two down, we have addressed this topic and are going to be very proactive on measures to drive attendance gains for the balance of the year, such that we don't miss the 96.2 that we've been projecting as our full year attendance number here for a board meeting or two. So I'll just stop right there and see if you have additional context you want to add.
I would just might add, right, like what we're seeing, other districts are seeing too, the flu is hitting everyone incredibly hard. It's hitting us hard with even staff being out. And a couple weeks ago, we had to do an all call to the CMO staff to see if we could get a set of volunteers to go be substitutes because it was a Friday, which is one of the hardest days to get subs. And we had some primary schools where we were just worried from a safety reason we didn't have enough adults to be over there. So I do think that this is very, very largely driven by illness, which is being seen across the community. So we're trying to now incent healthy scholar attendance as folks are coming back, and as the spring hits, we want to be on it.
Any questions about that one? Okay. Cash, we're forecasting the same as we were at the last board meeting, and I apologize, we didn't update the lower right expense management. Our forecasted expenses are actually about $700,000 lower than that number right there. So that part of the dashboard was not updated accurately. And I will just move forward unless there are any questions about the cash flow. I'll move to our FY18 net revenues forecast. And you've seen some changes in this one compared to where we were last time. Really, two kind of big areas. We are slightly improved on our state revenue forecast compared to where we were last time, despite the fact that we're lowering our enrollment projection a little bit. And that relates to some of the, an update that we made to our forecast model as it relates to some of the state funding formulas that we had outdated. There's constants that are in the formulas, and the formula that we had in our model that we're using for this projection were outdated, so we updated those. It was a win for us, but net we'd be down a little bit further than we were in January, was it not for this sort of catch up in our model. And then you'll see federal revenues are lower by a couple million where we were last time. This is all about timing. It's just the timing of when we think revenues are going to hit and expenses are going to be incurred by the end of the year, or if they're going to be pushed into the summertime. So not a concern that we're missing federal revenues, but it's just a timing question on that. Any questions on that? Or any other part of the finance review? Pass the time.
Are you going to go to the Uplift Summit piece now while you're
Oh, that's I was
You wanna go to
action.
Action.
Okay, good. Just wanted to check.
Yep. Okay, so now we have something really fun, I think. Okay, Cam, you're on.
All right. Well, what's going up is just kind of a flip book by the pictures of what sort of construction looks like, buildings. for those of you who also don't recall, I want to Real Estate Facilities Committee, and so I think a lot of projects get discussed sort of kind of amorphously, and we'll discuss school openings that are forthcoming. However, the site when people drive by or when so teachers may see looks like dirt for a really long time, and it can also look like woods for a really long time. And so we put this together just to show sort of how the baby's made, if you will. So this is Uplift White Rock Hills, and this will be September when we're starting construction. So to get to this point, there will have been usually 18 months to 2 years of conversations amongst this group prior here too, before sort of putting the first shovel in the ground. And this will show, we'll just flip through the last 12 months, which will take you through sort of site work, foundation, and the structure. So as you can see, we're in September 16 and school's supposed to start in August of 17. And so I'll quickly flip through just month by month. Again, it's about three different processes that will happen. The first is site work, as you start to remove trees and level the dirt. They grade the site and basically get it ready for a building to go on it. So we'll just fast forward. Now we're in December. Again, school starts in August. So if you were driving by and if you were to think like, how is this possible? This happens on every project. And so in January, you'll see we are bringing utilities to the site. You just sort of have a foundation, and it is not until the last 6 months where you start to get a structure. And then over the course of those 6 months, you do framing, you're gonna add a roof, you start to bring sort of chillers and air conditioning, and then you're starting to work on the inside of the building. You're bringing windows, you're adding siding, you're adding trim, and so that takes you up to August, and you have a complete building. And so, and with that, I guess sort of any questions. But again, this is mostly meant to be a visual representation because we do have schools under construction. One in Fort Worth that, again, under construction is in quotes. It's dirt right now, and we plan for it to be full school by January of 19. And with that, Melissa?
That's great, thank you very much. You have the lights back on, whoever's near. Well, again, I think Cam has done an incredible job as facilities chair, and I know that's not the proper title, real estate school, but it's a heck of a lot of work, and not only is it a heck of a lot of work to actually build one of these things, it's to find a site and do due diligence and all the things that Cam said take place for the 18 months, hopefully only 18 months before starting the demolition. So thank you very much for your efforts with us. Appreciate that. So, okay, I think we're going to start with our spotlight, which Ben is Ben.
Yeah, good luck with
Okay,
that last name.
what do you say? He is our tech guru, and when I go visiting campuses, they all love Ben. So he's doing a great job, and look forward to hearing.
Thank you so much. And I really appreciate the opportunity to do a little spotlight on Ed Tech. As Melissa said, my name is Ben Vermont, and I'm the Senior IT Director here at Uplift. I've been here about 5 years. And over those 5 years, this Ed Tech area is the one area that's really exploded more than any other in my area. So I'm kind of excited to share this with you. So first of all, what is Ed Tech? If you were to Google this, just pull up Ed Tech, you're going to find all kinds of definitions from kind of a digital learning, personalized learning, individualized learning. It gets pretty confusing. At Uplift, we focus it down on 3 key areas. And so I wanted to highlight those a little bit. And I'm going to keep the Olympics alive for you. I know it ended a couple days ago, but this is a cool way to kind of build on it. So first of all, at Uplift Ed Tech, it is enabling an e-learning environment that has 3 key pieces. The first one, it's a resource. It's a technology resource. It's software on a computer. At its core, that's what it is. And if you just use this, there's a lot of science in these tools. These are good tools. You'll get a bronze level experience. Your kids can learn. Parents buy these all the time. It's a good thing. But we want to go a little further. if you want to move up to that silver level, it's super important to have a strong implementation strategy around this. Okay, my team spends a lot of time training teachers, making sure we've got enough technology, enough time. We have usage dashboards so we can actually monitor how much these are being used. And that's really important because that just pushes these a little bit further. And a lot of times school districts just aren't spending enough time on these implementation strategies to make sure the tool's being used right. So getting that implementation plan in there is important. When I talk to vendors in other districts, this is where most of them stop. Okay? And that silver level, that's pretty solid. That's not bad. We push it even a step further. So this is where we do separate a little bit. We actually assess the value of these tools. That gets us to that gold level. So really what that means is that last bullet down there, making sure that these scholars can demonstrate this mastery outside the product. These kids are brilliant. They are growing up in a gaming world. And growing up in that gaming world, they learn how to advance in these tools without actually learning. They know how to level up, get the next star, next badge, whatever. So we actually evaluate these tools and make sure that they are able to demonstrate that mastery outside of the product. So let me take you a little deeper into that. On this slide, so there's a couple tables over there. Those represent growth in first grade and fourth grade. So what we do is, as you've heard, our scholars take MAP tests 2 to 3 times a year. And we take all that data out of that MAP test, how those scholars performed. We look at the ed tech tools, we pull all the data out of those ed tech tools, we marry it all up, and we try to find patterns. So this graph on the left, the top one is first grade. This is a primary math ed tech tool. You see pairs of columns, okay? Each pair represents a quintile. So Q1 on the left, then Q2, Q3 in the middle, Q4, and our high-performing Q5 kids on the right. Scholars that had access to this primary math tool, their growth is represented in the height of the orange bar compared to scholars that didn't have access to this tool, represented in the height of the blue bar. So you can see very quickly with this tool, every quintile got a little bit of a push for the kids that had access to this. Now, I am never going to stand in front of you and say, this is the end-all, be-all, this is the only reason. There's no way. Our teachers are amazing. There's so many things happening in the classroom, but it's a pattern. It's something we can look at. And in fourth grade, you can see we got a strong push in Q1, but not so much in the other quintiles. So we use this, we sit down with Yasmin, Rich, MDs, school leaders, and make decisions off of this kind of data. So any questions on that piece? Because I want to make sure that's really where we do separate. That one makes sense? So you can see a little reference to Harvard Proving Ground. So I put that up there because about 2 years ago, we had the opportunity to join a program, a project called Proving Found, where that analysis that I just talked about, we do that with our kids. By joining this program, we're now covering about 200,000 to 300,000 kids. So it's 13 districts. We throw all of our data in the same pool. They crunch it, they do analysis on it, and they give us feedback on these ed tech tools. So it's really a privilege to be a part of that team. Now here's something really cool. The very first ed tech tool they evaluated is the same one that's in those tables on the left. And they came back and basically validated our findings. They said, yeah, this primary math tool, there's something to it. So that did a couple things for us. First of all, it made us feel good about our decisions because they said also this is good. But they gave us confidence in the way we're assessing these tools. So we know we can continue to evaluate them and make sure kids are actually learning and it's not just that digital babysitter.
Is this something they do in the classroom, but can they also take it home?
Yeah, great question. So that's the beauty of this digital world is it doesn't have to be in the 4 walls of a classroom. So these are available for them outside the classroom. They can do it at home. All of them now are web service based, so they can actually access them from their cell phones. It's super easy. And you're leading me into my next page, so perfect. So it really is, where do we go from here? With our analysis, we're kind of hitting the target. We're in that, almost that sweet spot. But now it's just really refining it, making sure that we find the right products for all the quintiles, for all the content areas, for all the grades, and we really create that personalized learning environment. And to your point on the implementation, one of the things we did last year is we had a little summer contest. We let teachers know if their kids use this over the summer, whoever uses it the most, we'll give them some technology in their classroom, because we pay for it for the whole year. And so they can use it over summer and start to impact that summer slide. So it's really getting tighter with how to use it outside of the classroom. Inside the classroom, we have created a new stipend position, an innovative teacher. So it's just anybody on campus who's super excited about ed tech, and it can just be an outreach of my team, and it's a teacher in the classroom. So it just gets us a lot closer, continuing to drive usage and training. And then another key area that we're trying to look at is implementation, is really aligning this with TEKS. So we know what's happening in the classroom. It would be really cool to connect the content from an ed tech tool right with direct instruction. So it's a little bit of art and science going on, but it's, again, trying to make sure that this technology supports what's in the classroom. So that was like 5 years of ed tech evolution in 5 minutes. I know I covered a lot of ground. What questions have popped up?
Where might we go in another 5 years?
Oh, that's a great question. I think it really becomes just making sure that these scholars are comfortable in this environment. You know, this is their world. It's all of our world, but this is what they're growing up with. So a lot of it is making sure that they're comfortable moving into that higher ed environment, knowing that they can still be productive in a digital world. Taking these tools even further. Other questions? Yeah?
So is there some sort of correlation with standardized test for does this translate into higher scores for what the state looks at and things like that?
So it all connects back to so when you look at, so this is showing the orange bars is the growth on MAP. And MAP is one of those standard tests that we have found is a good predictor of performance on STAR. So it all aligns. So it's really just trying to understand which ones have that impact, which ones are driving that learning. And Os, I know this is your world.
No, I love it. And I love what you're doing. I have a question for you on, and I think it's great that the CMO is looking at the data, and I know your team is working really hard on that. How much does the teacher look at the data, and how much does that data drive how a teacher spends his or her time in the classroom?
Mm-hmm. So it is a great question, and it comes down to that whole implementation plan of understanding how to use this. Most of this is being used in centers, so the teacher will do the rotations, and when they're on that the digital learning, we've got classroom computers, and then the teachers have access to the tools themselves. They can see progress within the tools and make sure that the kids are moving along, not getting stuck. We provide usage information to the school leaders to really identify if a teacher's getting stuck or needs some assistance, and then we'll go out and provide additional training as well.
These data are a single snapshot. Have you had a chance to look over time to see if you're moving out or into?
Yeah. So we've been doing this now for about 2.5 years, doing this level of evaluation, and I have to come clean. I have to be honest. I had to dig a little bit to find a table that looks like that top one. Folks, they're not all that crisp. They're not that clean. It's not a perfect world. Typically, we see where it kind of goes all over the place, and that's okay because, again, we're looking at 8,000 primary scholars, and there's a lot going on here. What it's doing, though, is it's forcing us to ask better questions instead of always just looking for a single point in time answer, because this technology is moving so fast. If I find an answer today, it's probably not going to matter in a year from now. So really understanding the why things are happening and how we can align it is really helping us push this a little bit further.
But this is also post facto, right? In terms of driving
Yeah.
a priori, how can we do a little bit of a?
Oh, that's a great one, and I would love
Study,
your thoughts
basically.
on that one as well, because we do take the map 2 to 3 times, twice if you're a returning scholar now, 3 if you're new. So it gives us more checkpoints than STAR,
Right.
but, oh yeah,
We're
weekly,
still under the target.
monthly, weekly, daily would be awesome. So,
Drive the teachers nuts.
well, it would drive us all nuts, but I think that's where we need to think about this, is how can we learn faster and make sure that we're course correcting as quickly as we can.
How are we integrating technology into the new builds that help support, the hardware helps support the software that you're using?
So into the new,
Schools, that's what we're instructing them.
oh yeah, so if you saw back on the implementation support, one of the key pieces is making sure we have enough technology. When I got here 5 years ago, it was a little bit all over the place. We were kind of leveling into what technology looked like. And it was very interesting. In 2011, Chromebooks hit the market. They haven't been around very long. Chromebook is a perfect device for education. It's a low cost of entry. It's basically a gateway to the internet. They're lightweight. The battery lasts 8 hours. If scholars break them, they're not crazy expensive. So it was the perfect time to fit in. And so over the past 5 years, we've been moving away from higher cost laptops to lower cost Chromebooks. And so now our density is way higher. I think we're 1.7 scholars per computer device available. So we're pretty confident that we have enough. We're always monitoring that as well, just to make sure that these kids have enough time. But it's, when they were on PCs, it was a challenge. Now we've kind of moved past that. We do have some useful funding sources as well. So it's not all out of the state funds, but a lot of schools have access to state comp ed and title funds that could be used for technology as well. And that's helped us increase some of those computers.
And just a quick follow-up to that, so being on with that number of students being, or just people in general being on the internet and Wi-Fi, are we having any kind of structural things that are outside of our control
Yeah.
that we could be helping to monitor or to help, you know,
Look at you. Yes.
make some phone calls or whatever needs to be done in order to get that kind of thing? Because fiber optics is an issue in a lot of places in my own building.
Yeah.
So I'm sure that for, you know, new builds and existing buildings that there's probably some
Yeah.
issues with that.
Do you want to talk about our work with Splendid too?
What's that?
Do you want to talk about our work with Splendid when we're
Yeah.
doing construction?
Yeah, so again, when I got here, you're bringing up a great point, and it comes back to this whole infrastructure thing. We can put all the computers out that we want, but if we don't have the infrastructure to support it, they're just not going to work. We've got a partner, Splendid Technology, that has really helped us manage our infrastructure and our entire Wi-Fi internet across the entire district. And again, sometimes programs get it right, sometimes they're not quite right. There's one that got it right. It's called E-Rate. It's managed by USAC, so they give us tremendous discounts on internet services. I mean, it's 80% on the dollar. So we've been able to put high speed in all of our schools. We will have access points. You'll see one right over there with the little blue light. There's 4 of them in this room. We'll have one of those in every single classroom. That'll hold at least 50 users at a time. We actually, Splendid, went around and did a "can you hear me now" test. So funny. They actually went around and about every 3 steps they'd stop and take a read and just see how strong the signal was in every room, in every hallway across our entire district. They tested multiple different connection points, different broadcast strengths, and gave us a map. We found some dead spots and we're able to go in and plug those. So at this point, we're on top of it. It's not perfect. I think where people can help is outside of our buildings. You know, trying to find ways to get better internet service for some of our families. That's getting better. There's a lot of programs out there. But, I mean, we do our parent survey, and I'm always surprised by how many actually have access to computers and internet. But I think sometimes they're being creative. It might not be their router, but they figured out how to tap into one next door, or go to the coffee shop, or find. They're just very resourceful. So, you know, if you know somebody that can continue to push those programs for our families to get low-cost internet at their homes, that would be awesome. That's great, thank you. Other questions?
Great questions, and Ben, thank you. You have just taken us from the dark ages to the new age.
Got a good team, I will
Thank you.
tell you, I will say that, so, thank you, folks.
Yeah, highly appreciated. Okay, now another fun topic, and those are the Campus Advisory Council reports, and we've got two today. We're going to start with Stu, wrapping with Williams. What's up?
Well, you already heard part of Williams, and when Melissa asked me to chat with you all, I thought it would actually be informative to focus on challenges that CACs face. So I've been with Williams, which is the third oldest high school in the network, since it was dirt. So I appreciate the dirt. This past year has been a series of challenges, not only for us as a CAC, but for Williams as a school. We've had 4 scholars or tragedies with scholars happen, and we had to call that community together. I was at emergency room at midnight, twice. Not because I think I'm special, but because my team trusted me that either I would be there or someone would be there from our CAC. So if you are not used to giving hugs and getting a wet shoulder and carrying 2 handkerchiefs, please start doing that, because our job is to support our community, but that's also support is unfortunately those times when it's not taking cookies, it's taking flowers. So you have to deal with that. We've had a changing board. We've had 2 members have to resign off the board, actually within the last 3 months, and we're looking at strategically thinking how we want to replace those. I think we've been really lucky that a lot of you know a great network of people, but as some of our CAC board chairs know, it has to fit the group. Right? I don't want to say there's an insider versus outsider mentality, but a group that works together has to be a group that works together. So you have to do that teamwork. We're incredibly lucky. We have a couple of lawyers, one of whom has been working with some of our kids in the Dreamer Foundation. We have an aspiring lawyer who actually mobilized the entire Blackman Lake Neighborhood Association for the Rogers family this past week. Who also happens to be a friend of Miguel Solis's, so that we actually have those connections. So when you are thinking about what a CAC can do, yes, the teachers appreciate the treats at the holidays, they appreciate the thank you notes, but dig deeper. Where are those, got you in those gut moments? When I heard from our director that one of our brand new hires at the leadership level was in the hospital. How did we not only take care of that leader, but how did we take care of the senior leader who had 3 jobs to do all of a sudden? You know, we can rely on CMO, and thank goodness that we do rely. I mean, Rich, how many times were you at Williams this past year? More than, you guys were there a lot. We appreciate that. But it's also up to us to provide that phone call. You know, so an email saying, I got your back, or an email going, I know it's tough, but you know, in a couple of weeks when things settle down, let me go buy you a drink or something. Those kinds of things are really important. So I don't have a cheerleading report to give. I have a manage through the challenges. Because if it's worth it to your school, it's worth it to your CAC. That's really what I wanted to say. Does anybody have questions? I mean, I know this stuff is not easy sometimes. It's waxes and wanes. It's not always going to be the best thing.
And I think that's one of the reasons that the CACs are so important to our organization, because again, not only are they a link between the school and the Uplift board, but they also provide incredible support for the particular campus that they're on, and through thick or thin. So thank you so much.
I unfortunately do have
I understand. We have a second report, and it's going to be from our Hampton, and Kenneth Govan, and one of our CAC members, I understand, is with us. So welcome.
Thank you. Good evening. Kenneth Govan. A couple of months ago, Mr. Ardo came to me and introduced me to what I thought was a very special person who was interested in sharing some experiences and sharing some knowledge in regards that he had with students. He had a passion in regards to educating students on the importance of STEM progress. Dr. Paul Hackett is a physician with Charlton Methodist Hospital down in Southern Dallas County in Dallas, and got a chance to have a lunch and talk, and Dr. Hackett came over to the campus and had a tour, talked with the leadership at the campus, at all three campuses, and has agreed to join the Hampton Prep CAC. And he has agreed to be with us this evening. So this is Dr. Paul Hackett. And I want to introduce him to Paul. Had a lot of great ideas in regards to STEM and educating and getting girls, women interested in STEM initiatives and opportunities. We've also had the opportunity to expand our career exposure program. Encore, my company, has agreed to be one of the host companies, and we're going to take a group of students downtown to our corporate headquarters, spend half a day in regards to engineering, business administration, and government. My senior vice president and my outgoing chairman has agreed to spend some time with the students at our corporate headquarters. We were going to go to my facility in Lancaster, and Encore bought into it. And he was like, "No, let's bring them downtown." So we brought them downtown. We'll have a half a day in our boardroom, and have different engineers and people come to the campus. We've also agreed. Cynthia Minkins-Ross, I hadn't told you this yet. Cynthia Minkins-Ross over at Charlton Methodist has agreed for Charlton Methodist to also do our career exposure there. And I had a different idea. Michael Williams, the former chairman of the Railroad Commission for Texas, is a leader of a UNT Dallas. And he had the idea that a lot of times when we talk to students about universities, they're thinking about just going to school there. And he exposed us to understanding that universities have a lot of different careers, not just being a teacher. And so he has agreed to actually do the same thing with career exposure at UNT Dallas. So we're very excited about that. The mayor of DeSoto came over to Hampton Prep and had a tour. State Representative Helen Giddings is our representative for our area. I guess about maybe 2 months ago, she had a delegation from Africa who actually came to here, and she hosted them here, and she actually visited and had an interaction with DeSoto ISD, and then she also had an interaction with Hampton Prep, and she was very impressed in regards to some of the students there. So we was very excited about that. And as you can see, Hampton Prep was very nice to me. Yeah. They actually gave me one of their jackets. I went to an event. And I walked in, and they was like, "You don't want to know have a jacket." I said, "Well, I appreciate that." So they gave me a jacket. So thank you. That's the extent of what I have.
Well, you're obviously doing a fine job. Thank you so much. And again, welcome, Dr. Hackett. We're very pleased.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so next up, big events coming up.
Yes, breaking news. Deborah and myself and Cassie and a team of others on the host committee, thank you, have been working diligently. And I'm proud to announce that Cassie just sent a note that we are over halfway to our big audacious goal, which is a really good place to be for February for an April event. But it also means that we still have a long way to go. And for those of you who have missed previous board meetings, we have a fundraising target of $300,000, which is pretty hefty, but I'm excited that we're halfway there. In terms of what more is needed from the board and from people that you may or may not know is about 6 to 7 more tables. We're still working corporate sponsorships as well, but really 6 to 7 sponsorships, which means if you have anyone in your personal family or network or otherwise who would be interested in getting more involved in education, this is an event to introduce them to. We have an amazing speaker who wrote a book on reinventing America's schools. I think I told you all about it, but he does an analysis of New Orleans, Washington, D.C., Denver, and Indianapolis, and explores what they all did similarly, what they did differently, and some of the takeaways for America from that. We'll obviously have Hampton Uplift scholars there as well. I'm just listening to the Hampton, and are trying to bring dozens of people together for this great event at the Bush Library. And so I guess this is just one more ask. If you haven't already, to please buy a table or recommend a friend to buy a table with a stretch goal of 6 to 7 more tables to go before April. Deborah, I don't know if you want to.
Invite friends and don't say, I bought a table, you don't have to give anything. We want them to give something. We will ask for money. Just want to make that clear. It's my second time doing that today because Chief Development Officer. It's my job to ask for money. So I know it's hard to do that sometimes with your friends, but we will do the heavy lifting and ask everyone for the event, but just don't plant that seed in anyone's head unnecessarily, please.
I think it'll be a really amazing, robust discussion with people who are passionate about education in Dallas. It should be the education event to go to this year. Hopefully that broadens the list quite a lot in terms of who will be participating. But we're excited. I thought 13, 14 tables already full, which is really exciting.
Could you all send us a blurb that just kind of describes the evening that we can then forward to?
Yes, absolutely. We'll send it to the whole board. Absolutely.
Okay, well, there's no time like the present, so I just filled out my form. Okay, so let's go, everybody.
You've been to a tailgate luncheon before.
Yeah, exactly. All right, they made it really easy to do, and again, the sponsorships are terrific too. We've had quite a few of our friends have done that. So, okay, many thanks. A big round here. We moved into it. Those are always scary. Okay, we do action items. We no longer need to take care of action item A, so we're going to go to consider and take action on Summit land purchase, which is going to deal with our deal and the financing of it. And I think that's Stacy, if you would.
Yeah, so this came out in the second, or the update on the pre-read. Our landlord at Summit, our Arlington campus, we've been engaged with this guy for a long time. He's an Uplift dad of Uplift alum, and we've had a fantastic lease arrangement with the property for coming up on 10, 12 years now, and he's come to us with an opportunity for us to actually acquire the land, giving you some of the key aspects of kind of how the transaction would work. One thing I didn't necessarily point out or clarify, and it's not a term of the purchase sale agreement, but a fact that would be important to know, is that the lease, the tax payments, or the property tax payments that we're currently paying, I noted, is about $307,000 a year. That goes away when we acquire the property. So that's sort of the upside of the transaction. I will try to explain, and Jack, if I don't get it right, feel free to clarify for me kind of why there's this contingent component to the transaction. When right now, as a nonprofit leasing the land, our nonprofit status doesn't sort of flow through to the landlord, and so the landowner still pays property taxes on the land and the improvements. So that's the basis for the $307,000 we're paying right now. when we looked at if we were to buy the land, that going away, well, all of a sudden we save $307,000 a year. We ought to be maybe willing to pay for some of that. However, the charter school movement through advocacy efforts has been actively working this issue to have our nonprofit status flow through to any landlords for Uplift or other charter schools. And so we think we're optimistic that this law, we were really close a couple of sessions ago to having the laws changed in favor of charters to have our nonprofit status flow through. And so we don't think that that law is going to be around forever. So if the law is not going to be around forever, we wouldn't essentially save $300,000 a year for the remaining 40-ish years on the lease of this property. And so we weren't willing to value $300,000 per year savings over 4 years into what we would offer for the land. And as sort of a spot to land somewhere in the middle of saying, no, we're not willing to sort of pay anything for these savings. This is kind of where we landed on. As long as this property tax law goes unchanged, therefore we would have saved $300,000, then we're willing to make an additional $100,000 payment for every year that happens until the lease would run out. So does that kind of capture that? I'm looking at my finance committee guys. That kind of capture the sense of the $100,000, right? So that is the transaction. I've had a number of conversations over the last several days trying to make sure we could finance the transaction with taxes and bonds. There's some questions about that, so we're kind of working through those. Don't have those all firmed up yet, but should we get those firmed up, we'd love to be able to proceed with the transaction. And there are 2 resolutions related to us being able to do it that we've put forth in the pre-read. There's a resolution to acquire the land, and then there's a resolution on kind of how we would finance it, which is with our BBVA Compass line of credit. And so those are the 2 resolutions that are out there.
Can you just take a minute and explain, I was just explaining to Melissa why we couldn't use, or why, there's a question, Joe has a question on whether or not we can use bond proceeds on this, just because people might be wondering.
Yeah, I've had 2 maybe different points of view, so we're going to try and align these points of view over the next day or so, but potentially with a really long-term lease where we've already made a heavy investment in buildings on the property, we could be deemed the owner of the land right now for federal tax purposes. And if we already own the land, we can't acquire it and then refinance it with long-term bonds. We can't refinance property that we already own. And that is, from what I understand, I had bond counsel here, they may phrase it a little bit differently, but essentially that's what's going on. We're kind of deemed to be the owners already, and we can't do this real property refinance under a tax basis.
Hence why we would use other vehicles.
And our option in that case, if we wouldn't pull the trigger to acquire the land without knowing what our long-term financing option is. Our short term, until we get to the next bond, our short-term plan would be to use the line of credit. But we would need to know before we even acquire the property what our long-term plan is. We have 2 routes, a taxable or tax-exempt basis. And so if it's taxable, it means it's a little bit more expensive for us to do it. And then I'd go back to the finance committee to say, hey, here's kind of our options. Or our option if we can't do it on a tax-exempt basis. The intent would be for the next bond, if we agree, if we can do it on a tax-exempt basis, we would roll it into that bond. We would pay off the Compass loan. Or if we do agree, and we can't do it on tax-exempt, and we agree that it is an acceptable option for us to do it on a taxable basis, that we would just include a taxable portion of our next bond transaction, which would normally be tax exempt, but we often have a taxable tail on these bonds. This would just mean a larger taxable portion than we would normally otherwise have. But that decision of whether we would do it taxable or tax exempt is something I wouldn't proceed without finance committee's input.
this may be a question for the next finance committee, but if the next bond offering we do, can't we use that to pay off the financing facility anyway? In most
Normally, but not, depending on what we use that financing facility for. So if we used it to,
But is it
from
a
the Fed's
general working capital line?
No, I mean, no, we have to know what we're using specifically the proceeds of the tax exempt bonds for, and that's the guidance, is that even though it's paying off another loan, another financing facility, we have to be able to trace the usage to the acquisition of the land, and whether we're deemed the owner or not affects the ability to. Does that answer your question? But not factually.
Well, something we can look into on the finance committee.
As soon as I get more clarity that from bond counsel and our borrowers counsel, then I can be able to provide more specific answer to your question.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Stacy, do we pay the $100,000 per year?
To the seller?
To the seller?
Yes.
So we're effectively spending $2.5 million to save $200,000 a year, is that right? What's your guess?
The present value of all of our lease payments and a portion and a couple of years worth of property tax payments are $2.5 million. It's not. We're paying $100,000 to save $200 as long as that law is in place.
And our lease payments are $125,000 a year.
125. We're going escalating to 150 over the next 10 years, and then 150,000 a year lease payment for the next several years.
So what would be a downside, if any, of having this asset now?
We don't see downside selling the asset. Financially, we think it makes sense, and we don't see any downsides. There's only potential upside. There's from the tax perspective, tax impact,
And
cash flow savings on tax.
correct me if I'm wrong, but the way I view the transaction is the debt service alone on the purchase price is roughly equal to our lease payments as it is. So that $307,000 and growing property tax payment that we currently make, that's going to completely go away if we own it and be replaced by this $100,000 that we pay the current owner until if and when that law changes.
But even
So
if it
it's-
goes through 2056, which is like, yeah,
we're better than we are right now.
we're still, okay.
Yeah, I mean, the
Okay.
real risk, if the law changes and you know, we no longer have to make the tax payment, our debt service will still be approximately, you know, what our lease payment is. And at the end of the day, we now own the land on which all of our buildings and improvements sit. So there's really not much downside to this.
I want to thank the finance committee and Stacy, of course. There's been a ton of back and forth with Basu to try to get the economics and the deal points, so it was a win for everybody involved, and it's definitely a complicated transaction.
Well, thank you all very much. We have the need for two approvals. The first one is to approve the BBVA line of credit that we've been talking about to make the purchase. So do I hear a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Passes, thank you. Opposed? No. And the second motion is to approve the purchase of the Summit land per the final approval of the Finance Committee. So that means this is not the end. We'll make sure to keep coming back through the Finance Committee. So do I hear a motion to approve the purchase of the Summit land with the final approval of the Finance Committee? Do I hear a motion? Thank you. A second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Carries. Thank you very much. This has been on the agenda since I joined the board 10 years ago. So I really appreciate that. Michael, you know it well. So. All right, let's see.
Easier when around pre-K.
Yeah, exactly. Pre-K.
Pre-K, sure, we can talk about pre-K.
Yeah, good.
So really, pretty quickly, you know, it's always fun to talk about growth, and our pre-K is ever growing. You know, as I was kind of going through the amendments and identifying what schools are currently authorized, which is not authorized to serve pre-K, I figured let's go ahead and get the remaining schools who are not already authorized to provide pre-K, to go ahead and get them authorized. That is exactly what this resolution does. So a list of schools that you see, the campuses you see on the screen are the current campuses that are not currently authorized to provide pre-K. That does not mean that these campuses are going to have pre-K next year. It just means that we're going to authorize them so in the future we can get pre-K on those campuses.
Okay.
Any questions on that?
Do I hear a motion?
Yeah,
Sorry.
sure.
Once they're authorized, is there a time frame with which you have to put it, or is it just a
No.
formality?
No, great question. No, it's literally just it falls under what we call a non-expansion amendment. It's just a formality we have to go through. We have to notify the TEA. We have to get TEA's authorization to serve X number of grades. This will just get us authorized to serve pre-K. Yeah. Yeah.
Although we don't have to, do we have a time frame where we were trying to put pre-K in these schools?
You know, the growth is so for next year, we're adding Triumph and Grand. You know, we're rolling out, 2 campuses, 3 campuses. I mean, just, you know, it's kind of determined based on need in the area and kind of what we're hearing from the community. I can't say that there's any specific plan right now on.
I can go through the list real fast. I mean, we have it's got a 3-year rollout plan, and so Grand you'll have next year per Alex sharing. The new primary school building is coming online, so we have pre-K classrooms built into it. Mighty will have pre-K a year out from now. There are new pre-K classrooms in their building expansion. We had to add on a wing that was in the master plan, construction plan there. North Hills and Pinnacle, North Hills, right now, there's no facility space to put it, so it would have to be a partnership, same with Summit and Williams, where literally there's no capacity in their primary school building, so we have it up on Peak right now. Pre-K is offered off-site. We have a handful of campuses where we just couldn't put it on the campus. So if we can find the right partner at Summit and Williams, and all of our pre-K partners know our map of where our schools are, so as they have space in their facilities where they can tag classrooms as Uplift classrooms, then they would come online. Uplift Pinnacle Primary School on Illinois Avenue has a partnership off-site program, and then the South Campus at Camp Wisdom will have pre-K classrooms built into that additional classroom building when it comes online a couple of years from now. So that's just kind of the roadmap. As a new building comes online, we're adding pre-K classrooms. And then our partner organizations know our facilities are, in all intents and purposes, land or building locked, where we can do partnerships at their facilities with Uplift classrooms.
Good. Any further questions? We good? Very good. Okay. We need a motion to approve the resolution to add pre-kindergarten at multiple campuses. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Carries. Thank you. Thank you, Alex. Okay. Yes?
Yeah.
Oh.
This requires signatures from the whole Board of Governors.
Here's this form that's designed to be circulated. Doing your job.
This is all right. So, Yasmin, the Fort Worth CMO office space.
Yeah, so we've talked about this with our staff, that we're excited to have a small CMO office space in Fort Worth. And Johnny and I have been going around and seeing sites. It's not as exciting as the office spaces around downtown Dallas. We're definitely not looking in downtown Fort Worth either. And so off of I-30, there's a lot of land if you've headed that way from Summit to our Fort Worth campuses, so that gives us great economic deal terms. The goal is to have a CMO space around 3,000 square feet. That would be on I-30, off of I-30, past Uplift Summit, kind of in the middle between Summit and Meridian, which is at Beach Street, about kind of 10 minutes in between both locations. Our plan is to move into this space in June and have about 8 to 10 of our current CMO colleagues representing various departments being housed out there with then our executive team and RDOs and MDs rotating there out there on a regular basis. And so we do have a top contender right now that we're in the middle of doing final negotiations on. So I just asked my staff in the back, this is not final yet, we have no signed lease, but we do have a strong contender. So we're looking at the Western Insurance Building at 5601 Bridge Street. I'll share with you a picture of it and a floor plan in just a minute. For those of you who are familiar with I-30 past Summit, it's basically around 820. And literally, it takes me 10 minutes. It's a 17-minute drive from Summit to Meridian, and it's literally halfway in between. The specific space we're looking at is 3,588 square feet. You'll see on our rough floor plan drawing, it's going to be mostly cubes with a few offices that are just going to be open office for whoever is rotating through at that time, with a break room, a small reception area, and a pretty large conference room / small training space that we're specifically designing with flexible furniture, so that way if our campuses in Fort Worth and Arlington want to use it as training space, they can, and then we can repurpose the tables to make it a conference room table if we need to as well, so pretty modular. We are looking at both 3 and 5 year lease terms. Really, the lease rates don't vary too much from that standpoint. It's in terms of our TI, our tenant improvement build out, where we get a lot more bang for our buck doing the 5 year lease terms. The current terms of where they're at, but our brokers are still trying to squeeze out more, and this is after already going through one round of negotiations, is the first 4 months of rent-free. Then you can see basically the terms starting at $11.50 per square foot in month 5, increasing 50 cents per square foot every 11 months, plus electricity is running about maybe $2.50 per square foot. The effective rate is $11.72. This building we got in at $17 a square foot and currently is at $30. If you looked out of the window, you're either going to see freeways or empty land off of where we are in I-30, and so that does make it a pretty affordable market for us. Right now we are negotiating full turnkey of the site, which means we would pay no tenant improvements. They would do all the carpet, the painting, the knocking down walls, whatever that we need to do. That does not include furniture, obviously, we would put that in. And then there are terms in the lease around early termination, taking on additional space, all of that kind of stuff. My next 2 slides are just showing you a picture of the building, because when you're driving back and forth on I-30, like I do all the time, you'd be like, oh, there's the one building off of I-30. And before I flip to that, does anyone have any questions on the lease terms? Maybe we'll shave off another 50 cents, I don't know, on the effective rate. They were at like $13.50 and now we're at $11.72, but pretty pleased. Stacy had budgeted $100,000 a year and I'm at like sub $50,000 right now, so I'm feeling pretty good about myself. Any questions on the terms? Okay. Yeah, so this is the building. It's a curved building. Yeah, of course you've seen it, yeah, because it's the only thing there.
And it's like CVS 11, isn't it? Or something.
Ooh, I don't know about that. There's a Luby's, that's where we're going to eat. There could be, I'm going to pay attention to it. And then there's apartments right behind it. So as you can see, the building, as I mentioned, is curved, and that will come into play when you see the floor plan where you see this curve because of the shape of the building. So if we go top left, you see open office, then you see 2 small offices that could either be a nursing room for any staff who need it, or a private call office. We have that upstairs on the 5th floor today. Electric closet, really exciting. Then you see a workroom / storage room, that's like where the copier is and storage space. You see break room, kind of our kitchen area. right down below it, the big curve that says open office space, we can fit far more than 8 cubes there. But we'll start with 10 because again, we can then use the extra open space modularly for additional large meetings. You can see a tiny little lobby on the top right, and then that big empty open space below the lobby is that really large conference room / training room, again trying to give us multiple purposes, and then a second open office right there at the end. And we need to have some schematic because it informs tenant improvements of what we need them to do. So my request is, Melissa and I just thought because it's entering into either a 3 or 5 year lease that it would be great to get the board's approval. It is built into our pro forma budget, so we know we have the dollars there for it, and would just love to get your approval pending the final negotiation of lease terms over the next month or 6 weeks. If there are not any other questions.
I think it's a great idea in order to have our CMO closer to Fort Worth as we keep expanding. So I think it validates what we're doing here. So thank you for pursuing. Johnny, thank you for however many office buildings you looked at. Well, there's only one.
We did look at a couple.
We looked at three.
It was a stretch. It was a stretch. The book had like 10 in it, and we said only 3 met our requirements. I mean, this is honestly true Class B office space, just to kind of anchor folks of where it's at. Just set an expectation.
Keep setting expectations. So, do I hear any other questions of Yasmin on the lease? If not, I need a motion to approve the lease agreement as specified here, pending further negotiation.
Yeah, it's only going to go down. So.
Okay, it's only going to go down. So, do I hear a motion to approve?
So
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Carries. Thank you very much, and that'll be great. And when is this going to be available?
June is when we want people to be able to move into it, so we still have plenty of time. The TI on this is pretty.
Excellent. Okay, we've completed our meeting agenda, except for the community open forum. I don't believe anybody has signed up to speak. Is that correct? Assuming that's correct, and as no one's speaking, I adjourn the meeting at, let's see, gosh, dog, really, 6